Hi there. Welcome, tribesmen of the Tusk, fanatics of the Fang. My name is Dreadmir, and welcome to my little clinic. Forgive me, I was a bit distracted. My hands were a bit idle while waiting for our simulation to complete, and I had these models lying around, and you know what, this information isn't important. We all know the real reason I called you here. Today, one of our creatures has been tasked with facing off against a rival hybrid from a fellow contestant of the Great Hybrid War, Erza YT2. Geez, I hope I said that right. I present to you Monstrous magnifibius, better known as Lucy. Now, for such a formidable giant, we'll need to field a giant of our own. For this matchup, we welcome the return of Riktor, also known as Barbarosuchus gigas. In truth, my patron has been wanting Riktor to hit the field again. After our other hybrid, Pike's most recent escapades, they thought Riktor could use some fresh air. And what better way to get back into the swing of things than a good bit of blood sports? Gets the blood pumping and flowing. Plus, I may or may not have forgotten to submit Riktor to the contest, but that's not important. The fight is happening now, and it's time to see which behemoth comes out on top. Before we begin, it's very likely that if you're watching this video, you've already seen the respective videos for both Riktor and Lucy. If you haven't, I highly recommend you watch them first for greater detail. Links will be included in the description down below. In order to not repeat everything from the videos and spare us some time, I will leave a list of all the genetic contributions and what they bring to their hybrid's build on the screen here. Feel free to pause if you want to read it. While we wait for the simulation to complete, I have analyzed 16 categories that I felt were most relevant to these creatures in how they will fight and how they will win or die. Finally, as much of this is not an exact science, many of the feats and conclusions I draw for these creatures will be based on the information displayed in their respective videos, as well as the real-world displays and research done involving their genetic contributors. Now then, let's begin. Their lengths are effectively the same, so it's a tie. Next category.
Oh my god, you're so tall, you look like a giraffe.
That's why you dead built like a baked bean. A baked?
Heights are fairly close, with Riktor actually being a foot taller than Lucy. However, this only accounts for them when they're on all fours. Since hadrosaurs were well known for taking a biped stance, and a full-grown Monstrous could easily reach 18 feet when on its back legs, there's no reason to believe Lucy can't do the same. Thus, she gets the point. This one's pretty plain cut. Lucy is 20 tons. Riktor is 15. Not even the largest estimates for the creatures I used in Riktor's design came even close to this. The point goes to Lucy.
Strongest there is!
While it's difficult to determine the exact limits of these creatures' strength, considering the muscular powerhouses contained within both genomes, it's fair to say that neither of our combatants have been skipping the gym. However, mass does play an important part in determining strength. After all, there is a reason why there are weight classes in most combat sports. And considering Lucy does outweigh Riktor by almost 5 tons, it's likely she is physically stronger. While Riktor's claws, bulk, and wide stance would make him difficult to move, in a pure shoving contest, it is likely that Lucy gets the point.
Speed. I am speed.
While determining the speed for creatures of this size can be a bit tricky, when you analyze their genetic contributors, speed still feels like a rather clear-cut point for Lucy. Let me explain. With Riktor's design being heavily based around ambushes, brawling, armor, and explosive power, he was never going to win a foot race. Even with his longer legs and explosive lunges, it's likely Riktor would be slower than even the Tyrannosaurus Rex, who was barely reaching 15 miles an hour. Compare this to Lucy's Edmontosaurus base, who was well designed for quick acceleration and could maintain speeds of just under 30 miles an hour. Riktor is simply outpaced.
You will never get this, you will never get this, la 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 la.
To my surprise, agility might actually be one of the closest categories so far. You would assume that since Lucy won the speed category, that she would be naturally the more agile creature, and to a degree, you're right. Considering hadrosaurs oftentimes had to swap between a biped and quadruped stance, and had to rely on their senses and speed to outrun their predators, it is likely that Lucy would be naturally faster when it comes to changing direction and pivoting. However, at nearly 20 tons, Lucy is pushing the limits of how agile a hadrosaur can be, carrying an additional 5 tons compared to her opponent. Despite his heavy armor, Riktor was actually designed to be more mobile than any modern-day crocodile. With long, powerful legs, Riktor can keep his body off the ground, making him more mobile as well as quicker to turn and reposition his body. While he may not be dodging every blow coming his way, he's not completely sedentary, and with the ability to angle his armor as he's needed, it makes reaching any weak point much more difficult. While both creatures were surprisingly agile in their own way, I will be giving the point to Lucy just slightly due to her greater speed.
He's biting my toe! He's biting my toe! He's biting my toe for real! He's gonna bite.
Oh boy, time for the bite test. A pretty important category considering the mouth will be the primary weapon for both combatants. While it's hard to get an exact number, we can use their genetic contributors to make an estimated guess. Let's start with Lucy. Lucy's primary contribution to her bite is the hippopotamus, whose bite force can average around 2,000 pounds per square inch, or a little under 9,000 newtons. Now let's compare that to Riktor's primary bite contributors, being the Dinosuchus and T-Rex. You might see where I'm going with this, with T-Rex having one of the most well-researched bites, coming in at between 8 to 10,000 psi, or 35 to 40,000 newtons per square inch, and Dinosuchus having estimates that could potentially double that. It feels reasonable to say that Riktor gets the point. Even if we take the largest hippo bulls coming in at nearly 4 tons and scale them up to Lucy's size, which isn't how bite force works, but let's just go with it, it would still only be comparable to the average T-Rex and not come close to either animal's higher estimates. Point to Riktor.
Do you value your teeth?
For this category, both combatants sport their own set of uniquely dangerous teeth. Riktor's jaws sport rows of large conical teeth for grabbing prey, while slight serrations courtesy of the Tyrannosaurus cut through flesh. Lastly, 3 sets of enlarged tusk-like fangs from the Caprosuchus line each side of the mouth, nearly twice as long as every other tooth, perfect for deep punctures into vital organs and body cavities. On the other hand, Lucy sports the unique dental set of the hippo, including sharp-pointed incisors and enormous tusk-like canines on the lower jaw, designed for disputes, combat, and impalement. This is an interesting debate, as both sets are rather deadly, but in their own way. Riktor's teeth should make more contact during the bite, be better at gripping the prey, and even inflict deep punctures with the tusks. However, none of them match Lucy's tusks in terms of sheer size, and their exposure does make them more susceptible to damage. The majority of Lucy's teeth would be less effective at dealing damage, except for the tusks. Not only are they massive, but with their position on the lower jaw, they would not only be able to punch through armor, but also impale the underside of their victim. Essentially, Riktor's bite is more consistently dangerous, while Lucy's bite would be less reliable, but more immediately fatal. Since there's an argument for both sides, I think the safest choice is to call this a draw.
2 357s, a 44 Magnum, 2 10mm pistols.
For auxiliary weapons, we'll be comparing Riktor's armored head, spiked armor, and swinging tail versus Lucy's thumb spikes and tail whip. Admittedly, against giants like these, some of these weapons will have limited success. For For example, Riktor would find it difficult to properly ram or bludgeon Lucy considering her greater bulk. Likewise, Lucy's whip-like tail would be less effective against his thick armor. This leaves Riktor's spines and tail versus Lucy's thumb spike. While this thumb spike could be quite dangerous if it landed a blow to the underside of Riktor's flank or neck, due to its size, positioning, and the overall structure of Lucy's forelimbs, favoring a more up and down stomping motion as opposed to swiping to the side. The spike will have trouble penetrating the stronger cranial armor, failing to leave any meaningfully deep wounds. While Riktor's spines and tail may not cut too deep, they will play an important part in this fight: deterrence. Anytime Lucy tries to ram or wrestle with Riktor, she'll be in constant contact with the sharp spines. And if she does try to approach from the rear, not only could she get a good whack across the face from that tail, but the spines and armor located there would limit Lucy's ability to attack or exploit his rear, something Lucy's whip tail would not be able to prevent, assuming Riktor pulled the same maneuver. For this, I find Riktor has the more impactful auxiliary weapons, and thus gets the point.
We didn't penetrate their armor. That one didn't go through.
On to a more simple category, we have armor. While Lucy's Solidosaurus armor does provide solid coverage and durability overall, it was purposely picked for being a lighter armor, as to not restrict Lucy's mobility. Compared to the thicker ankylosaur and nodosaur plating on top of Riktor's crocodilian osteoderms, and their near full coverage across his body, Riktor will get the point for armor.
Well, what's that then? I've heard worse.
Durability. Just how much damage you can take. Between Lucy's greater size and Riktor's better armor, it's hard to say. While both creatures are true tanks that could weather a storm of punishment, the question then becomes how well each combatant could continue the fight after suffering grievous wounds. With this in mind, I think Riktor slightly pulls ahead. Modern-day crocodiles are somewhat known for their hardiness, and there are numerous accounts of wild crocodiles and alligators surviving despite the loss of limbs, tails, and even parts of their jaw. While there is certainly plenty of evidence of hadrosaurs surviving pretty insane attacks, for a creature as large as Lucy, the loss of even a single limb would cripple her movement and her ability to support her own weight. This would be especially so if the wounds were inflicted on her hind legs or her tail, as both areas are vital for her structural support and balance. It's a close call, but if both combatants were grievously wounded, I would have more faith in Riktor to finish this fight.
You can't hurt me, Jack.
Yeah, this one's a tie. Both creatures were designed with rather robust immune systems and an emphasis on venom resistance. Not much to talk about here.
Sometimes my genius is... it's almost frightening.
Intelligence is a rather tricky matter to discuss. Both combatants were designed to take on the Indominus 2.0 and its own cunning intelligence, with an above-average intelligence designed within their genomes for problem-solving and situational analysis. Lucy should be technically smarter due to more consistent feats of intelligence from the likes of the wild boar and African hippo, plus our understanding of hadrosaurs. Studies on Tyrannosaurus suggest it may have been one of the most intelligent theropods to ever exist. And while Deinosuchus proportionally had a much smaller brain, ongoing research on crocodile behavior suggests that despite this small brain, crocodiles in general are likely much smarter than we ever gave them credit for. It's possible that both Riktor and Lucy would have been capable of showing many of the same social and intelligent behaviors, such as parental raising, group dynamics, hierarchies, and many more. How much use this intelligence would provide in a fight is a bit unclear, and it's likely that neither truly hold a major advantage over the other. Sure, potential factors such as Lucy's hippo temperament and Riktor's predatory IQ could swing things one way or the other, but without a more concrete answer, I think the safest bet is to make this a tie.
I can smell you.
Regarding senses, I believe this will also be a tie. Both possess excellent vision, hearing, and senses of smell. Combined with the fact that both creatures are simply massive, it's unlikely that either would go unnoticed. Sure, Lucy does have her camouflage, and Riktor could remain still while relying on his counter shading. Both have the means to detect each other. Even if placed in the perfect environment to blend in, that assumes that either of them would even try and hide, as neither creature is exactly subtle about throwing their weight around.
She knew my one weakness! That I'm weak!
Time for the weaknesses, or rather, which creature has the less exploitable weakness. While both combatants are fairly heavily armored and well covered throughout their body, no juggernaut is truly impervious. Let's start with Lucy. The most notable points of weakness being the neck, front limbs, hind limbs, and the tail. While rearing up on her hind legs could alleviate some of these weaknesses by raising the neck and front limbs higher off the ground, the trade-off is a more exposed underbelly, assuming her attacker is willing to enter the range of her stomping hooves. Two other notable spots would be the hind limbs and the tail. Due to the structural support and number of muscle attachments in these areas, both are crucial for Lucy to maintain not only her great weight, but to maneuver at effective speeds. For Riktor, the most notable weak points would be the neck, underbelly, and limbs. While neither the neck or limbs are unprotected, to allow for greater mobility, the armor in these areas is notably weaker than that of the back, making it easier to penetrate. However, Riktor's greatest weakness would be his own bulk. As if an opponent were able to flip him onto his back, his exposed underbelly would be vulnerable. Though this task would be quite difficult, and Riktor is capable of righting himself, the act would take some time, in which an opponent could attack with little chance of retaliation. While Lucy is certainly capable of reaching those weak points and maybe even flipping Riktor, his armor angling and lower stance would make this much harder to accomplish. Combine this with Lucy's more exposed weak points, and Riktor gets the edge in this round. For our final category, let's talk about their special abilities. While both combatants are primarily physical fighters, relying on their great strength and powerful bodies, both of them bring at least one slightly unorthodox ability to this fight. For Riktor, it's his poison-secreting pores, and for Lucy, it's her cuttlefish camouflage. We did partially cover both abilities in previous sections, though to cut things short, I believe both abilities would have minimal impact on the fight. Assuming Riktor's poison could affect Lucy with her hardy immune system, the dosage required to affect her 20-ton body would likely be too great to permeate through Lucy's skin over the course of a battle. Compared to the Indominus, Lucy would be throwing out attacks much less frequently, thus lessening the time the poison has to make contact, weakening its effect. While interesting, it's unlikely Lucy's camouflage would do much better. While she could potentially ambush Riktor, her great size, coupled with the sense of smell and vibration detection, would make her difficult to go unnoticed. And once the fight begins, it's unlikely Lucy will have a chance to use it again. Ultimately, neither have a definitive edge, and thus, this round is a tie. Analysis complete. Finally. It appears our analysis is complete. Now that we have the data all collected, it's time to reveal our winner. In this earth-shaking match between tooth and claw, scale and plate, fang and tusk, the winner is Riktor. In what might be one of the closest matchups Riktor could have ever faced, Riktor barely, and I mean barely, overcame the odds to defeat Lucy. So, why did Riktor win this fight? Originally, when I had planned this fight, though he would have a tough battle ahead, I was reasonably confident that he would be able to win the majority of his battles with a hadrosaur like Lucy. Though, as I dug deeper into the details, I was shocked at just how even this matchup was, and more surprisingly, how many rounds they were simply tied. Out of 16 rounds, over a third were a tie, with many of these ties being in the more non-physical aspects, such as their senses, intelligence, and abilities. This made it a rather straightforward battle, as neither had any tricks they could really pull on the other. Lucy took the edge in overall size, strength, and speed, combined with her other traits, and in many of the fights, this would have been more than enough to win. She was likely strong enough to flip Riktor onto his back to expose his weak points. Her lower tusks could easily pierce Riktor's underbelly for a fatal blow, and with her greater speed, she could dictate the pace of the battle, engaging and retreating as she desired. Not to mention rearing up onto her hind legs, a full body stomp with those thumb spikes could deliver a fatal blow to Riktor's skull. Emphasis on the word could. Ultimately, I feel the deciding factors that contributed the most to Riktor's victory were his armor, his bite, and his less exploitable weak points. With his thicker armor, lower stance, and defensive armor angling, it's unlikely that the majority of Lucy's weaponry, outside from her lower tusks, would be able to deliver an immediately fatal blow, as she struggled to reach any effective weak points without putting herself at risk of being in contact with the jaws or the tail. Meanwhile, Riktor's own jaws would likely have little issue penetrating Lucy's armor, or crushing any limbs he managed to catch, potentially even ripping them off with the death roll if given the chance. While Lucy could raise up onto her hind legs to avoid some attacks, with their comparable sizes, it's unlikely Lucy could trample Riktor or deliver a single stomp that would stop his attack, all while Riktor endures the blows to reach for the now exposed underbelly or rear legs, both of which would spell doom for this hot-tempered hadrosaur. This was a close fight, but through ironclad defenses and an armor-shattering bite, Riktor comes out on top. Lucy faced the jaws of death and was found wanting. If you've made it to this part of the video, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to visit my little clinic. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed my content, and leave a comment down below on what you'd like to see next. Expect more to come. But in the meantime, this is Riktor Dreadmir, signing off.